The school tragedy, the Bath Township explosion. That shocked America. The morning of May 18, 1927, began like any other in the small town of Bath, Michigan. Children laughed as they ran toward Bath Consolidated School, their lunch pails swinging. Inside the classrooms, teachers prepared lessons, unaware that in just minutes, their peaceful school would turn into a scene of unimaginable horror. At exactly 8:45 a.m., a deafening boom ripped through the air. The ground shook as if the earth itself had exploded. Windows shattered, walls crumbled. In seconds, the north wing of the school was gone, turned into a pile of smoking debris. Screams filled the air. Parents ran from nearby homes, their faces white with shock. Dust and smoke clouded the streets. People clawed through the wreckage with their bare hands, desperate to save the children trapped beneath the rubble. The smell of burned wood and gunpowder mixed with the cries for help. Someone shouted, "There are kids under here!" Another voice cried, "Get the doctor! Hurry!" Then came another explosion, even louder than before, but this one didn't hit the school. It came from the direction of a farm outside town, the property of a man named Andrew Kehoe. Flames rose high into the sky, turning thick and black. No one knew it yet, but Kehoe was behind it all. He had spent months planting hundreds of pounds of dynamite under the school, all while pretending to be a helpful local farmer. Back at the school, chaos ruled. Rescuers lifted pieces of wood and brick, finding terrified children covered in dust, blood, and tears. Some were still alive. Many were not. A mother screamed her child's name over and over. Another man fell to his knees, holding his son's broken hand. Reporters would later describe it as a scene from war. Then, through the confusion, someone noticed a truck slowly driving toward the school ruins. In the wheel was Andrew Kehoe himself. The crowd recognized him. He had been on the school board, known around town as quiet and strict, but never violent. As people waved him down, hoping he'd help with the rescue, Kehoe smiled faintly. Then, right before their eyes, his truck exploded, sending a blast that killed him, the school superintendent, and several others instantly. The shockwave knocked rescuers to the ground. Shrapnel flew in every direction. When the smoke cleared, all that was left of Kehoe's truck was twisted metal. The crowd stood frozen in horror. What kind of man would do this? As the town tried to make sense of the destruction, a police officer found something strange near Kehoe's body. It was a sign, made of wood, with hand-painted letters. It read, "Criminals are made, not born." What did that mean? Why would he destroy a school full of children? That question would haunt Bath Township forever. But the truth behind Andrew Kehoe's deadly plan, the anger that drove him to murder innocent kids, had started long before that morning's explosion. And as investigators soon learned, this tragedy wasn't a moment of madness. It was carefully planned for months. Months before the explosion, Bath Township looked like the perfect small American town. The streets were quiet, lined with farms and friendly neighbors. Families helped one another with chores, and most people knew everyone by name. It was a safe place, until one man began to quietly turn that peace into hate. That man was Andrew Kehoe. He was smart, calm, and very precise about everything he did. To most people, he seemed like just another farmer. He wore clean clothes, kept his property neat, and served on the local school board. But beneath that calm face, something dark was growing. Kehoe had problems, money problems. His farm was deep in debt, and he was angry about taxes. When Bath Township IP decided to build a new school, every property owner had to help pay for it. Most people accepted it as something good for the community, but Kehoe didn't see it that way. He believed the school taxes were ruining him. He blamed the school, the teachers, and even the superintendent, Emery Hoyk. In his mind, they were the reason for his hardship. Instead of asking for help, Kehoe's anger turned into obsession. He began to think the whole town was against him. Neighbors later said that Kehoe had always been difficult. If a machine broke, he'd spend hours fixing it himself, rather than hiring help. If someone crossed him, he never forgot. When his wife, Nellie, became sick with tuberculosis, he barely showed emotion. Some said he grew even colder. In late 1926, Kehoe started doing something strange. He told people he was doing maintenance at the school. Since he was on the school board, no one questioned it. They trusted him. But what he was really doing was terrifying. He began hiding explosives, dynamite and pyritol, a powerful war material, underneath the school's floors and inside its basement walls. Week after week, he carefully ran wires, connected fuses, and set up hidden detonators. No one suspected anything. Teachers walked right over rooms full of bombs without knowing it. At the same time, Kehoe's anger grew. He argued with other board members, complained about taxes, and even stopped paying his mortgage. His farm was about to be taken by the bank, and he decided the town would pay for what they had done to him. In early May 1927, Kehoe's wife's health got worse. Instead of helping her, he made his final preparations. He bought more dynamite and stored it in his barn. He wired his entire farm with explosives. Everything was ready. On May 16th, 2 days before the explosion, Kehoe went to Lansing to buy more blasting caps. The store clerk later said he seemed calm, too calm. When asked what he was using the explosives for, Kehoe said simply, "To remove stumps." No one could have imagined that he was preparing for the worst. School massacre in U.S. history. On the night of May 17th, Kehoe made his move. He placed a sign on his fence that said, "Criminals are made, not born." He cared enough to make sure people would see his message after he was gone. That same night, he went into his barn and began setting his final fuses. Inside his home, Nellie lay sick in bed. She had no idea what was coming. Kehoe went upstairs quietly and ended her life, then wrapped her body in a blanket and placed it on the bed. Next to her, he left a pile of silver coins, as if paying her final debt. By dawn on May 18th, everything was set. The dynamite under his house in the barn and beneath the school was wired to go off. At 8:45 a.m., the first explosion hit the school, destroying the north wing and killing dozens instantly. Minutes later, his farm erupted into flames as his barn exploded, taking with it his wife's body, his animals, and every trace of his life's work. People who ran to help thought it was just another tragic accident. They didn't yet realize that Kehoe was behind it all, that he had planned both blasts to happen together. But the full plan didn't work. When police searched the school after the disaster, they found over 500 pounds of unexploded dynamite hidden in the basement of the south wing. If those bombs had gone off, the entire school would have been wiped out, and hundreds more children would have died. Investigators later said the only reason the second half of his plan failed was because of a single broken wire. One tiny mistake had saved dozens of lives. After the school blast, Kehoe loaded his truck with metal tools, nails, and more explosives. Then he drove straight into town, toward the very ruins of the school he had destroyed. As rescue workers fought to pull survivors from the rubble, Kehoe pulled up, looked around at the panic, and called out for the superintendent, Mr. Huys. Kehoe. Witnesses said they saw the two men talking for just a moment. Then, without warning, Kehoe set off another explosion, blowing up himself, his truck, and everyone nearby. The explosion sent bodies flying through the air. Windows shattered blocks away. Children screamed as fire filled the street. When the smoke cleared, all that was left of Kehoe was a twisted piece of metal and that wooden sign from his farm, his final message to the world. Bath Township would never be the same. Parents searched for their children in the wreckage. Neighbors hugged one another and wept. The town had lost 38 children and 6 adults, with more than 60 others injured. Reporters arrived from across the country. The story appeared in every newspaper. America had never seen anything like it. But even as the country mourned, one question remained unanswered. Why? Why would a man destroy his entire world? That question would lead investigators to uncover shocking details about Kehoe's final months, details that would make the town realize just how long he had been planning revenge. The days after the explosion were filled with silence, smoke, and sorrow. Bath Township, a quiet farming town that once smelled of fresh soil and spring air, was now covered in the scent of burnt wood and dynamite. The laughter of children had vanished, replaced by crying and the sound of shovels digging through rubble. Families searched for anything, a shoe, a ribbon, a toy, anything that might belong to their children. Across the town, people whispered one name over and over again: Andrew Kehoe, the man everyone had trusted, the man who had fixed the school's wiring, who waved at neighbors, who spoke kindly to teachers. How could he have done something so cruel? Investigators arrived from Lansing and Detroit. They were met by a sight that looked like a battlefield. Pieces of desks, books, and children's lunchboxes were scattered across the schoolyard. The explosion had been so strong that a child's notebook was found hanging from a telephone wire more than 200 feet away. The Sheriff's team began piecing together Kehoe's plan. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. In the wreckage of the South Wing, they discovered hundreds of pounds of unused explosives, all wired carefully with timers and detonators. It was clear. Kehoe hadn't just wanted to scare the town. He wanted to erase it. Back at his burned-out farm, investigators found what was left of Kehoe's life and his secrets. In the barn ruins, they discovered the bodies of his horses, tied tightly so they couldn't escape. It was as if he wanted to destroy everything that had ever belonged to him. Inside the remains of his house, they found his wife Nellie, wrapped neatly in a blanket. Near her body were personal items: a silver watch, pieces of jewelry, and those silver coins. Everything was placed with cold precision. On the fence outside his destroyed home stood the wooden sign that read, "Criminals are made, not born." To the police, this wasn't just a message. It was a confession. Kehoe believed that life had treated him unfairly, that the town and its taxes had made him desperate. In his twisted mind, he was the victim, and his act of violence was his revenge. When investigators followed his financial records, they found he had stopped paying his mortgage long before the attack. His land was about to be taken by the bank. His wife's medical bills were piling up. And still, he used the last of his money not to save his farm, but to buy explosives. Neighbors who once thought of him as quiet now remembered things that didn't seem so small anymore. The time he killed a dog for barking too much, the way he'd scold anyone who disagreed with him, and how he always seemed to keep his feelings hidden behind a tight smile. One man recalled visiting Kehoe's farm a week before the blast. "He said something strange," the man told police. "He said, 'You'll soon hear a big noise in this town.'" I laughed. I thought he meant thunder. But there was no laughter now, only grief. The funeral services lasted for days. Coffins, many of them heartbreakingly small, lined the streets. Entire families collapsed in tears as they said their final goodbyes. The Bath Consolidated School disaster had become the deadliest school attack in U.S. history, and it remains so even today. When President Calvin Coolidge heard about the tragedy, he sent his condolences. Donations poured in from across the country, people from every state sending money to help rebuild the town and support the victims' families. Even school children from other states sent nickels and pennies in envelopes with small letters that read, "We are sorry." In the months that followed, Bath Township faced a painful decision, whether to rebuild or to move away and let the memory fade. But the townspeople refused to let Kehoe's hatred destroy their spirit. They built a new school on the same land, a place that would stand not as a memory of terror, but as a symbol of strength. At the dedication of the new building, the superintendent, who had survived the explosion by mere seconds, spoke through tears. "We cannot change what happened, but we can choose to live with hope, not hate." That line became a promise for Bath Township and for the entire nation. Over the years, the story of the Bath school disaster slowly faded from headlines. There were no movies about it, no TV shows. Some said it was too painful, too dark to talk about. but in the quiet corners of American history, it remains a powerful reminder that evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows silently in the heart of someone we think we know. Today, if you visit Bath, Michigan, you can still see the memorial near the site of the old school. There's a bronze plaque listing the names of all the children and adults who lost their lives that morning. Nearby stands a small white cupola, a piece saved from the original school. Every year on May 18th, the townspeople gather to lay flowers and remember. They remember the teachers who tried to protect their students. They remember the parents who ran into the flames to save their children. And they remember the innocent lives taken by one man's bitterness. Nearly a century later, the Bath School disaster still asks us one haunting question. What could make someone do the unthinkable? Maybe we'll never know the full answer. But one thing is certain, the people of Bath showed that even in the face of unthinkable loss, hope and community can rise from tragedy. That day, the school fell, but the town's spirit did not. If this story moved you, don't let it fade away. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another real-life story that shaped America. This was the school tragedy, the Bath Township explosion that shocked America. One of the most heartbreaking true events in U.S. history. Stay tuned for more real-life crime stories and mysteries that remind us how fragile and how strong the human spirit can be.